Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
And we're back for part 2. I'm here with Amrit. If you haven't checked out part 1, make sure you do that. Otherwise, much of what we're about to talk about may make very little sense to you. I don't know. Or don't. It's up to you. You're the listener. You can do whatever you want. Back to part 2. We were talking there about some of the challenges facing the startup ecosystem, I guess, but quite broadly to, say about it at the end of part 1 there. But I wanted to talk a bit more about kind of what you're doing now. You, at the beginning of the last episode, talked about your journey into VC and I don't know if I'd say a non-traditional journey, but there was one thing you said as well in your intro, which stood out to me too, which was you were saying about there was a point where you wished you had a different background. What did you mean by that? Was there an embarrassment there about your background or a frustration with it? What do you mean?
So I think it's more of maybe a generation of being fed off like Instagram and Twitter, right? And you've got LinkedIn, I guess, to a large degree, but you see, other people's and other peers and like how successful they're doing. And then you kind of like, oh, well, I wish I did that. Or
right,
they've done a really cool deal. Or they found that a really cool deal because of who they are. And then, you have that sort of internal battle going on. You kind of actually, you probably don't even have the full story or full picture, but you sort of fill in the gaps, right? To creep in sort of that, I guess, maybe where lack of confidence I had before. And so that's probably where it came from. I think it's that kind of, comparing myself to others. My view is it's actually not a bad thing comparing yourself. It can drive you, right, for the right reasons. And it's pushed me to be a bit more, but at the same time, you kind of do doubt yourself, right? And so I thought, try and be a bit more different, try and be a bit more ruthless with my time and all sorts. And then I just hated it. I really did hate it. I was just like, it's not me. It's not how I want to be venture. And then sort of like when you find someone who, and this is why I think it's like super important in venture, is to have a mentor, is to have someone who kind of was like you, kind of how you want to play venture and what are your sort of beliefs on how to do things. When you find someone like that kind of gives you a bit more confidence. It's like, hey, that dude was pretty successful. Maybe that should just be me. And again, that's what he's been like drumming into me for the last like year and a half. And I think there's also a friend actually who's a founder of a startup. He's like, the older you get, the more convinced you are of your own opinions. And like, because you get older and you get like less of a shit. Like when I think about my parents who are like retiring, they don't care about anything. But when I think about when I'm like 21, oh my God, I cared about absolutely everything. Like it was the end of the world when I didn't do X, Y, and Z. And I think it's like this steady curve you get point. And so I think venture, there's a point where you kind of have to be old enough to not really give a shit, actually, what other people think and kind of double down into your opinions. And I think that probably kind of realized as well. It's just like, maybe I just got old enough that I kind of just doubled down, didn't really care as much of the opinions and just focus on being me at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's maturing, right? That's the very definition of maturing. It's funny, my wife said something interesting at dinner last night. She said that she was speaking with a colleague who she's sort of vaguely knows, like they're not best friends or anything, but they know each other well enough at her work. And her colleague said to her something that really stood out, which was, you're a very confident person. Like she just mentioned it in a conversation. She was like, what? Me? Like, and she was like completely taken aback by that because she was like, complimenting her, saying, oh, but you're really confident the way you carry yourself, the way you communicate. You're so confident though, And it sort of transpired. She realized that her colleague had been looking up to her like these last couple of years as a really confident person. And my wife had never looked at herself like that before. Never. She's, and I said to her like, oh, well, that's because you've been so busy adulting, getting married, becoming a homeowner with me, becoming a parent, that you've completely forgot that 20-something person isn't there anymore. The 20-year-old, whatever person isn't there anymore. And that in fact, what you are now is a very confident wife, career-driven woman, a mother, like, and you've done all these things. And so you're exuding that before you've even realized it. And now you're that person that other people are looking up to going, I wish I was a bit more like that. It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think there's a point where you go through stuff, right? And you're kind of just like, I've gone through worse. What's the worst that can happen? Like, in perspective,
Right.
it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Like, sort of situation, right?
Yeah. But like I said, when you're a teenager or something, it's like, oh my
It's like,
God, this is the worst thing.
yeah. It's like, you
Yeah.
don't get it, mom. You never get it. Sort of situation. Yeah. Like Kevin and Perry style.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're doing kind of, well, you're in VC full time, right? But then Angel is kind of thing too. So what are the things that you're doing day to day? Like, so people can really understand what is the day. And I know this is like such a cliche question, and I'm trying to word it differently. But ultimately, what I'm asking is, what is the day in the life of a VC? Because if I'm there's been a meme going around recently. I don't know if you saw it, of someone who was like, woke up, made a coffee on their really expensive coffee machine, drive their Lamborghini to the gym, all of that to like come home and then just send one email. Is it that, or is there more to it? Like, what is really the tasks of a VC day?
I need to join that fund if that's the case. I need to find that fund is. Like, I love Mercia, you're great and all, but like, I could do with a Lamborghini and an expensive coffee machine.
I think that was Sequoia Capital as well.
Okay. So like, the sort of three areas what a kind of a VC does. One is sourcing deals. Second is doing deals. And the third is making sure the deals don't go to shit and hopefully making money on it. Those are sort of the three areas. So your sourcing piece is you attending events, networking, building your brand, maybe doing podcasts like this or like newsletters or all that sort of stuff, or reaching out to founders, doing your desktop research on that. And usually kind of as analysts and associates and I guess new people to venture, you spend probably most of your time doing that. You don't have a network, you're building your network sort of through it. And then as you get older, you do less and less. But actually, I've got a thesis that the best VCs actually can keep on doing that. And then the second bit is sort of doing deals, which is like trying to be Socrates and like Archimedes and being really philosophical about where this business can be and analyze a financial model and think about the market. And, you'll do the negotiations, you'll sort of kind of win the deal, you'll do the legals and all that good stuff, which is, it's a whole lot of fun. It's good doing it. It's a bit of a rush. When you win a deal, you get a dopamine hit for sure. And then the last bit, which I think is like the funnest bit, is, I probably phrase it correctly, but being on the portfolio side of things, because that's, I think, when you learn so much more, you become so much better as sourcing deals. You earn your stripes because the founders of that people will talk to other founders about you, and that is where you earn your respect within it. And that's the 7-8 o'clock phone calls on a Friday. That's inviting them to your home. That is being a part of their journey throughout. And obviously you've got corporate governance, you need to manage things, and you need to, don't get me wrong, ensure that your fund gets the exit return, because that's what you're ultimately paid to do. But that's like the really hard stuff. But for me, that's the really fun stuff. And I think a lot of people go into venture, thinking it was just like doing deals and deals and deals, and that's like the fun bit. But actually the real where you really earn your stripes and where the most part of the work is on that portfolio side, like managing different conflicts, managing different people, managing sociopaths on boards. You meet every Tom, Dick, and Harry on it, and that's where we spend more and more of your time doing. But like, it's the most rewarding bit because you'll be on board maybe from a year from now, and the company's revenue would have grown, and you just look back and go like, wow, this company has done a huge amount. And then you understand the intricacies of that business far better than you ever would by doing good desktop research and become, I don't say an expert in it, but you really do understand what the hell's going on and what to look for. And so that's broadly the three things what you do. And so your week will be split across those three things. So this week, for instance, where I've had a lot of papers to write, so I spent a lot of my time doing that, but I've sort of been at about 4 or 5 events maybe this week, speaking, being panelist, and I've drum up deal flow, build the Mercia brand as well, and then I've had board meetings and then managing the work associated with that. So it kind of varies, and I think a lot of people assume you do a lot of deal sourcing when you're really young and junior to venture, and as you get older, you build your network, people just send you stuff, you know who you are, and then it becomes a lot easier. And so as a partner, you may spend more of your time on the board, maybe 60%, 30% doing transactions, and then 10% sourcing new deals. While as a analyst associate, you're probably doing 60% sourcing new deals, 20% transactions, 20% deal flow. But like the best actually kind of partners I've met, investment directors, or the ones I look up to, are like ones who, even at like 50 or 60 or whatever age they are and been in venture for ages, still source deals as if they're hungry, as if they're an analyst and associate. Still want to get in front of the best things, but sort of leverage their role within the fund to make things happen a lot quicker, and they'll like come up with new ideas from that. And it's that hunger's never really gone. And those are the ones that I'm like, I want to be like that when I'm older, sort of situations as like a kid. So that's kind of what it's like as a VC, effectively. I don't, unfortunately, just send one email, drive off a Lamborghini. It's probably working, it can sometimes be 50-hour weeks to 70-hour weeks.
Oh, wow.
It's probably what it's like. Do have to work weekends.
But that's out of choice, right? Because you're enjoying it.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, venture is one of those really odd jobs. So like if you're a lawyer or an accountant, you get billed by the hour effectively, right, to a degree. And so the more hours you do, the more money you kind of make. Venture, there could be some people who will literally just do one deal work, bare minimum, maybe under the 37.5 hours a week, and probably still kick the ass of a person who's working like 80, 100 hours a week. Like your success is so unpredictable. Like hopefully the more hours you do, the more you improve the probability of it, but it's not guaranteed. And I think that's like the kind of strange often bits for it. I think people can sometimes get confused with.
But so how is financial success tied to a role like that in VC? Because if presumably it's about the exit game, right? So
yeah,
so that's when partners and principals and so on are going to be getting a payday. So a lot of that hard work is really for later, for a commission essentially that's coming years down the road. So I suppose it requires you A, to stick around, and B, to just keep the work going. On the assumption that one of them may pay out and give you a great payday, right? There's no upfront commission here.
I wish that'd be great. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's like hugely delayed gratification to the extreme. And I think, there's a lot of people joining venture like 2020, 2021, thinking there's a lot more instant sort of thing. And don't be wrong, you get annual bonuses and stuff like that. Where you really make your money is like 7 years from now. And the way it works with venture, as opposed to other asset classes, is you kind of guarantee your LPs, your limited partners, people who invest into your fund, that you'll 3x their money within a 7-year period, or maybe 8, 9, 10-year period. And then anything on top, so you'll get 20% of the profits as a fund. So to maybe give an example, say your fund was a 100 million fund, you returned 500 million, you would give 300 million straight to your LPs, because you 3x their money, and the 200 million left, the VC fund would get 40 million, so often get 20%, and then the remaining 160 million, they would distribute back to the LPs, which, if you think about it, often teams are maybe 5 people, and so 40 million can be a huge, life-changing amount. But it is really hard to get kind of a 3x or even a 2x, let alone a 5x. I was listening to the other day about on the Acquired podcast about like benchmark capital. I don't know if you ever listened to it, but it is like a phenomenally interesting story. It is probably one of the most impressive VC funds I've ever listened to. And I think there's like their first fund was something like, I think it was an 86x or like 55x.
Oh, wow.
And so basically all the partners had made, I think it was like a 55 million fund or something like that. And they turned it into something like 8 billion or something stupid. And they made crazy amount of money on the result of the back end. They all became billionaires and that's what they wanted to do. It was crazy. Like fund 7, they made like a 25x as well. You don't really get those sorts of returns in most other asset classes. To be honest, you don't really get in private equity, you don't get not. So, yeah, to your point, if you find that one company it can be completely life-changing. But because we know that there can be these outsized returns. So I think one of the benchmark portfolio that they invested in eBay at like 20 million valuation. 12 months later, I think 24 was valued at 2 billion and IPO'd. So they had about 25% of that 2 billion. It's just
good
like
timing.
Very good timing. So
Yeah.
it was just like insane. And don't get me wrong, you've got to be in the right rooms to get this sort of stuff. But yeah, it is a quite, I think it's, and I quite like about it is there's a sense of, it can be a quite equalizer, right? In terms of when you're working as, in a corporate, you've got to climb the greasy political pole, right? You've got to fit in and do the things. Eventually, you're kind of master of your own destiny. You're based on the deals you do and the deals that you don't do. If they don't perform, you're out of venture. If they do, then you get your Lamborghini and that expensive coffee machine.
It's interesting as well from my perspective that in the sense that it kind of sheds light on some of the motivation of some of the people that you'd be dealing with as a founder when you're going to VC, right? Because you are, usually applying online.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Right, you're submitting your deck and putting your thing, and then at the end of it, there's probably someone fairly junior sifting through that, trying to find the diamonds in the rough, passing them up. And when you look at the sort of the various modes of motivation across that, which is that, then it suddenly makes clear kind of what are the things that are going to capture the attention of that person at the beginning of the process versus the person at the end. And so things like, demonstrating a clear exit strategy, suddenly that becomes a little bit clearer. The fact that you've maybe got a slightly tighter timeline on exit potential versus others, that seems more appealing. Well, suddenly, because everyone's invested in that, across the board, and things like that. So it's really interesting to see those things and to think about it from that perspective, because, at the end of the day, you're an organization, a VC firm's an organization. Everyone's got an interest ultimately for themselves, right? Because of everyone's looking out for number one to a degree, as well as the like you said, the more altruistic things, like they want to be part of people's journeys and work with awesome people. But that is a factor too that we have to be cognizant of, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually, I think ages ago, I put a poll in the VC chat, like, would you still do this job if you didn't get carry? Most people said I think no, and I think 3 or 4 people said yes. To be fair, I'd be the person I would probably still not do this job if I didn't get carry. And would it make VC better if there was no carry? I have no idea, because arguably, money drives people. You get smart people because of it, because they want to make money, and as a result of that, you kind of get brilliant competition. And if you don't, then you kind of you may not get the same quality of investors, and therefore LPs just may not believe in the asset class. But then would you get kind of altruistic people who I just love doing this. I love helping founders. I love doing that. Yeah, so I don't really know. I just thought I'd share that kind of experience.
Yeah, but no, it's an interesting point, because if it's just like anything, I mean, money is a good motivator for sure. But you can make that same distinction between I quite often use the UK medical system versus the US, right? A taxpayer funded one versus a privatized one, and when you look at the quality of service you get in one versus the other. I've used even privatized services in the UK, for example, when we were going through IVF. That was a privatized thing, obviously, and the very first clinic we went to, it definitely felt like we were being taken for a ride, and it didn't work. And it didn't fit. What is their incentive of getting you pregnant if they can charge you 10K every time they try? You've got to think about that. They're claiming that that's what their aim is. Well, are you sure? Because you seem to be really enjoying the fact that you need to do this the third and the fourth time, versus the place we went to afterwards, which was, didn't seem to care as much about the money, and then we got a result straight away. So, you do. It does also corrupt as well, is my point, I guess. And so, it's never a silver bullet, is it? You can't motivate everyone with money. There needs to be, maybe a nice balance of the two.
And I think it's that. I point we touched on the last time. It's about just being vibes.
Yeah.
How do you cut through that kind of dichotomy you have, right? And how you sort of talked upon, it's do I just trust this person ultimately? I think it's that sort of five mentality when it kind of comes down to. But yeah, you're like absolutely kind of right for it. But I think the other point talking about like the exit thing, I don't think you should be sharing kind of what the exit is to a VC. And that's my opinion. I think it's something that we should derive and value. We should ascribe what the exit situation is. And, we should be understanding that by understanding what public market's doing, how it's shifting, how the venture landscape is moving. Because one, I don't think anyone knows what the exit situation is going to be until the point of around exit, or we can kind of hedge and kind of guess our perspective on it. And things change so much throughout it. It's all that butterfly effect we talked about, way earlier on. And so often when I think about like startups is, can this achieve a big exit? I don't know what that exit is and how big it's going to be. Is there, balanced probability? Do I think there is a more favorable condition than not? And I think that's often the case, right? Don't get me wrong, there are often founders who it becomes incredibly important for them. They may have childcare issues, they may have certain backgrounds, they may have to, pay off bills and their mortgage, and so they need to exit things off really, really quickly. Fine. And I think those can be kind of quite clear constraints. But everything else, it is a broadly black box. And so, again, when founders go, I think this is going to be a 2 billion exit opportunity. I'm like, I don't think you really know that, to be honest. And I think you've done a lot of work on maybe getting this reason. Like, I think it's a good part of your time. And it's not going to convince me that it's a 2 billion exit, to be honest.
Yeah. I think maybe listing some of the potential acquirers could be useful, but I think could be useful. But even then, it's still guesswork, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important for me to see founders who appreciate that it just is. It is guesswork at this sort of stage, but like are thinking a bit more strategic about it. Look, I think this would be valuable to your point of Amazon because they're spending loads of money in sustainability deliveries or whatever. Yeah, fine, you've got a pretty good thesis that kind of makes sense. Does everything else stack up? Well, then let's go for it. If you're kind of saying, I am revolution the next typewriter industry, and I think, Staples are going to buy it, or I'm...
Staples, are they even still around?
I don't know. Then I'll probably have something to question about. I'm kind of be really sus about it. Or is it going to be a private equity exit? Well, in which case it's going to be quite constrained on that sort of thing. And so, again, it comes on that sort of belief of looking at the wider picture of things. But yeah, I don't think exit should be, unless without any kind of clear, obvious red flags, I don't think you should really make a decision based on exit because I don't think either party knows. So therefore, I don't think you should be using it to say, you should invest in this because of the exits. You should invest in this because of the exits. It's kind of like people are buying shit really expensive in this space. Let's hope it continues sort of situation as opposed to...
It is a question a lot of founders I know get asked though, about what is your exit strategy, even at pre-seed and seed stage. So, begs the question, how do you go about answering that question if it's so ambiguous? Ambiguous,
yeah.
I don't know why I said it like
the word
that.
Is ambiguous.
Yeah.
So again, I think because the point of sort of 2-1, everyone plays venture differently. Maybe everyone wants to sort of see it, but I like to think it's actually more of a point of a reflection of the founder and their ambition, as opposed to actually what the exit's going to be, in my opinion. Just because it sort of demonstrates, your willingness to grow the business. And it comes back to whole point like market size is my other sort of tripe on this situation. No one knows what it's going to be, but obviously you go, okay, I think, you saying, oh, I want to grow this business to 10 million. Well, I can't really make the money on that. That kind of is more of a question of you're ambitious. Or I want to be a quintillion-dollar business when none of those have ever existed. Or I want to be the next OpenAI. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going
to remove the mention of quintillion out of my pitch deck straight after this.
I was just thinking of that Austin Powers scene or that meme.
Yeah.
And so, like, those are probably the two bits. And then it's kind of like, okay, does the founder understand how an exit process sorts of works and understands what it's going to be? Or do you think it's going to work in a fall on their lap sort of situation? And so that's when I think the point on, yeah, hey, look, I know, maybe the head of sustainability at NVIDIA at this point in time, and they are spending huge amounts of that, and they are making acquisitions in the space. And I know that they, are buying companies at this sort of position. I think they'll still be willing to do it within 3 to 4 years. And so therefore, I think if we grow the business to that makes a lot of money for you and me. Okay, that sounds like a plausible story for both of us. I will probably fact check it and do DD. And do I believe in that? Make sense and make it work? Great. But is it going to be true? And am I going to hold you to it? Well, no, I'd be a fool to do that. But the fact that you've come up with a plausible way of how to think about the exit landscape is a more reflection on your ability to think than the number in and of itself.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it feels like a lot of these things are kind of exercises just to make sure that you have the capacity to figure it out later on, or you have the tool set that's required to just do the job of being a CEO, which is a very tough one, right? And be a founder. It's not necessary that you're expected to absolutely nail it. In the same way that producing a 5-year forecast in pre-seed and seed. I mean, it's a complete load of bullshit. We all know that forecast is going to be nothing like, or very unlikely to be
exactly
close to what it's really good. But it's just to show that you've taken the time, that you understand the fundamentals of a P&L, of and things like that, and you're doing it broadly within a realistic range, and that you're and things like that. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. It's more of a demonstration of base skill than anything else, right?
Yeah, exactly that. Like, I get so many financial models, and again, Series A may make a bit more sense, or Series B, or
right.
seed, where you've maybe got a bit of data and you can sort of extrapolate things out. But even then, I mean, I think maybe even a better way to think about it is if you look at even the public markets, where you've got huge amounts of data on a company's financial period, and how many of those companies trying to forecast the next 12 months, or people try and guess what the S&P is. They're all wrong. They're never very accurate, and it's because
I've done that. I've done that P&L management before, where we're trying to forecast, and it's never right. And sometimes it's been with companies that have 10, 12, 20 year records, and it's just like, we can do our best guesses, but ultimately there's so many variables.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like the things I look at are like, okay, you're trying to sell to enterprises, and it's assuming that your customer growth rate is like 1 a month. I'm like, I just don't think it's going to happen, love. Like, I just don't think it makes sense. Or they are wanting to sell to enterprise, but they'll go like, we'll do £100 a month or £100 a year just to get under the price and really show value. I'm like, your salesman has to like sell to so many enterprises, takes so long to sell it. It just doesn't really quite make sense. And so I think kind of an ill thought out financial model is often a reflection of two things. One, just never done the exercise before, totally fine and understandable and excusable. Or two, not really thought about where you want the business to be. And don't get me wrong, things can be absolutely not go to plan, and things never ever do, and you need to kind of iterate. But I think that kind of ability to really think about that stuff in granular detail and then reflect it in numbers can be a really useful exercise at times. And so that's what I think the financial model is. And like, if your VC is really, stress testing of whether your month 2 revenue is 25, it should be 25k, not 30. I'd say go to a different fund, if I'm being really honest.
No, absolutely.
Bigger problems to worry about.
I think it demonstrates a certain amount of practicality, like you said too. Like to your point about that salesperson, for example. Like if you've been in sales, or at least understand sales, you understand lead time, you understand contract negotiation time, you understand all those things. To say launch and then 2 months later you start earning revenue, it's like, no, you clearly don't understand how this works. And so you're demonstrating your gap in knowledge there immediately. Versus, okay, you've either, even if you haven't done it yourself, you've at least taken the time to consult, speak with experts, get advisors, and then you've got. So then it shows your ability to be resourceful, or that you have that domain expertise in the first place. So yeah, it does a lot, doesn't it? So it just de-risk, provide a bit of confidence, I guess. I wanted to ask as well, you've obviously taken part or been privy to a lot of pitches in your time, I assume. So what would you say are some of the big errors that people make in pitching? Yeah, what are some kind of like nightmare scenario type deals there?
So I think the kind of like nightmare sort of situations are like, I look at it and I'm like, I don't really know what you do.
Right.
Like, And that's what, my role, or I guess every investor's role, is I'm trying to remember what you do and trying to regurgitate it to the IC. So I need to make this as memorable as possible. And like, we all love those eureka moments, like, oh, I get that. And so, when I talk about like the problem solution, I often think about, like, if I don't understand what you do, it's going to be really difficult for me to be able to present that to the IC. So that's like, there's a one really big error. Think about it, like, we have an attention span of like a goldfish, right? And so make it as simple as possible for us to like kind of just absorb it and go forward. And I know, deep tech founders, there is a sense of, having to understand the specialty within it. But
I've just got to quickly interrupt this episode for a quick announcement, and that is that if you are a tech founder, a CEO, a business owner, well, the chances are that's probably why you're listening to this show. It is called Founders Unplugged after all. And if that's the case, then you really need to listen to what I've got to say. So look, as someone that's been in the tech startup world now for a very, very long time, and as a founder and worked with lots of businesses globally, working in those companies has taught me a really big lesson. And that is that finding the right tools for your team can truly change your business. That's why I'm really excited that today's episode is sponsored by Deal. That's Deel. It's an all-in-one platform for global teams. Deal is designed with the needs of a global workforce in mind. Seamless contract signing, easy expense uploads, in-platform time-off management. They can handle paperwork, exchange foreign salaries into local ones, and ensure compliance with local regulations, and loads more. Plus, its customer support team is available 24/7, and that is really, really important. If you're ready to see how Deal can transform your global operations, head to deal.com. That's DEEL.com to book your demo today. So thank you so much for Deal for sponsoring today's episode. You can use the link in the description or the QR code on the screen down there somewhere. And now we'll get back to the episode.
Often I think it can be played to your strengths to be able to sell it in a really unique, really simplify it and explain it. A, you open up the floodgates for generalist investors. But B, I think it demonstrates ability to sell, because you're again a deep tech CEO. You're probably building it quite expensive. You're probably going to have to get approval from a CFO of a company. Let's face it, as an accountant, and may not understand how you do. So I think doing that in a really good way is super important. So I think really, really memorable, short. If I'm being super honest, like, I think 11 slides is probably all that you need. And, you want this pitch deck for me to then want to have a chat with you and a 30 more time to really pick apart what you're doing and really understand it. And when it's like War and Peace, this often the sad bit is like, I found I have like a really amazing slide about their team, or like about a really interesting defensibility bit on exclusivity with a GTM or traction or whatever it is. I like bury it like all the way down to the end. Like, I'm not gonna lie, my finger hurts from scrolling too much, and so I just don't see it. I think like aesthetically pleasing, as much as investors don't want to admit it, I think it is actually kind of really important, if I'm honest. Presents you, depends on how you look. So, and it becomes quite difficult to sort of socialize internally. Hey, do you want to read this text that's done in white font in New Times Roman and read why it's super exciting? It's quite hard to get others, involved. And I think that's probably one thing people sometimes forget, is like, I'm not the decision maker. I need to socialize and kind of get everyone else on board for me to kind of take this opportunity forward. So like, let's try and be as presentable as possible. The sort of second bit, maybe fourth point I'm trying to make, is earned insight. And what I mean by this oftentimes is I often do a thing with like SaaS businesses of, okay, how can I kind of think about how this company is built within like 5 minutes? Like, what does the architecture look like? And I am no like software developer. I've done like very basic levels of coding, probably can get my way around some sort of code to understand kind of what it does, but wouldn't say I'm an expert in the lightest, and definitely not a full stack developer. But if I can think about how it's sort of built and put together with my kind of simpleton brain, I kind of feel like I'm missing something here. Like, where's your edge in that sort of perspective? And so often like earned insight is, okay, I spend a lot of time in this market, or I've researched this market, and here's an interesting fact that you probably never know about. And this has allowed me to build something really interesting that you've not really thought about. So I don't know, I guess to kind of carry on that with an example, it could be like, look, I've worked in procurement for 25 years or whatever that experience. It's actually really difficult for us to get, CO2 emissions on all our understanding of our products, which is becoming a really big problem for it. So I've just built the largest database of CO2 products, and I've got them because of my extensive network within the space. Again, it's a pretty crappy example, but like, if I can Google kind of the problem solution, what you're doing, it just doesn't feel kind of unique. I want to tell me something new and different that gives me that sort of edge with it. And I think a lot of pitch decks don't. And I think that it falls foul of, okay, Innovate UK are great. They're an amazing bunch of people, but like the way you apply for grants is like super high level, and it's very like, big market size sort of thing. But I think investors, it's all about like, what's your Trojan horse? What's your wedge? And that's often very something really niche, narrow, and that's your earned insight on a particular area within that market to allow you to then grow and expand. And so, an example of that is like Square. They sort of revolutionized the point of service, payments of service sort of checkouts, kind of made it a lot better, great experience with that. And then expanded into, helping founders to build their business. And it's some of that earned insight of that allowed to expand elsewhere, as opposed to, we're going to make it easier for people to build businesses sort of situation. So that's like my sort of big tripe about it. Sort of in pitch decks on what does well and what doesn't. Like, show me why you are amazing and what you've learned to allow you to win a market.
That's really useful insight. And in terms of the process from there, I mean, you obviously, the pitch deck is your first point of call, as we know, and you're sifting through that. So it does have to do those things that you said, which, I think it's interesting as well that you mentioned, like, we've got short attention spans, simplified things. There's always a concern there that it can come across as patronizing if you oversimplify, but do you know what I mean? But like, I broadly agree with that though, in general, because I think that's the same with any kinds of communication, that you just need to keep it easily digestible. Most people have a short attention span. That's not something indicative of VCs or you personally or anything. We're all overwhelmed with information. That you need to make things easily digestible. Design factors into that. There are design principles that exist for a reason. As someone that used to do graphic design, I can tell you that. You put things in a certain format and present them in a certain way, people are going to digest them quicker. So yeah, all of that is really, really important stuff to point out to people, I think. But then in terms of the process, so the pitch deck, obviously that's your first point of call. But then from then, you're likely jumping on a call if it's of interest. You're jumping on a call, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe there's a common misconception that in that call it's going to be like, right, okay, hi, nice to meet you. Okay, you've got 2 minutes, go. It's not a Dragon's Den scenario, and if it is, you should probably run for the hills, in my opinion. But so what in that scenario then? What what's happening? What are you expecting to occur? And again, kind of what are to poke you again? What are some of the things that you see that goes wrong there that you think are easily avoidable mistakes?
I actually think that it starts off before then, and I think that founders don't realize.
Okay.
Like, how do you interact with me over email? I think is like a super interesting perspective, and how you deal with me, because we are trying to constantly look at gather more and more data points, and I don't like people. I don't want to say like I like having smoke blown on my ass, but like, if you're asking for a call with me and then like I'm having to chase you to set up the call, it's not really a great look for you, right? I kind of do like when fans like, booked a call, here's the times at work, super on it, and then often, maybe follow up with a Q&A afterwards, after the call sort of situation. So like being really on it before the get-go, and I know it's an incredibly tiring process and you have to keep on doing it, and I get like you may slip at times and that's totally fine, but being on your game, you just need to be on your game once or twice and you can get that yes. So I think it's kind of important even before, like how you present yourself, how you set yourself up, telling what people need and sending in a concise manner, right? Because again, sometimes we get emails and they are like war and peace of like why you should invest in this and why it's the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm not going to read through all of it. Sorry, I've got a lot of things to do, just like as we all, right? And so like, people with like really quick bullet points of what I need, it's around, so why it works, this is other people interested, here's a link to my calendar, let's set up a call sort of situation. So that sort of stuff I think it goes a long way. Then on the call, you're right. It is. I'm trying to kind of suss you as a person as much as one can do in 30 minutes. And sometimes it's maybe going through a pitch deck, seeing how you present, kind of what you think the talking points are interesting, or maybe touch on points on like the problem, the solution, all those bits and points, go through the traction, have some obvious questions. I'm just trying to kind of gauge you as a person, really at that sort of point. I don't think I've really digested the deck and say I'm an expert in what you do in your field within that period. It's just not really the case. And then after that, we'll probably do some more kind of research digging, speak to kind of industry experts in that space, post it. But often that thing is like, do I think you're suitable for VC funding? Do I think you're the right person I want to work with? Do I think we're the right person to lead this business sort of situation? Are there any red flags that are flagging, I guess, at that sort of stage that I need to be aware of? And that's often all it is.
What would some of those red flags be at that stage? Because of, presumably most of them would have bared out probably at the earlier stages than that. But what are some that could crop up at that particular stage when you're speaking to them?
Yeah, I think you'd be, really surprised, actually. It's like, I don't like fans who are overly obnoxious. I'm being really honest, no one really does.
I don't know. I don't think anyone likes anyone that's overly obnoxious.
They're sort of like outright control kind of freaks where they're like, I'm not accepting this. I don't like VCs for this. I didn't ask you for that. You know what I mean? Like when they just kind of tell you something before you even dial them, it's just like, it's a bit weird.
Well, that happens, does it? That's a bit odd.
Yeah. I think the second bit is they lie on the deck. And I think that's like a really big red flag is they'll say, oh yeah, on the deck, and be like, yeah, we've done 2 million in revenue like last year. And we've actually done 2 million over 5 years. And I'm like, well, not quite the same. And it's just kind of really disingenuous. And it feels like your intent, because it is, to your point, you made right at the start of like pieces on a pedestal, and like I think kind of investing is sales. I think a fraction of it is, but I think it is sort of trying to get to know one another and having a conversation as opposed to sales. Okay.
Well, you see, to me, they're one and the same thing. Because for me, when I describe sales, I describe that as relationship and communication.
Yeah,
that's ultimately what it's about. But that's my personal philosophy.
That's interesting. Yeah, I often when I think about sales, I think of like second-hand car salesman.
That's what most people do. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like,
but real sales is about relationship building, and it's about excellent communication. That's the fundamentals of it, in my opinion.
And then it's sort of that, and no one likes to be an idiot on a call. Like no one wants to feel embarrassed in situations. And it's actually kind of nice, and you get an insight of, like I'll ask a question and go, look, I'm sorry, it's maybe that sounds like a really silly question. And actually sometimes I say it even though I know the solution. But could you explain this to me again? And if they're like, oh, you don't understand it. Well, what do you like with your employees? What do you like with other people you work with? What are you going to like with future shareholders? And so you have these sort of ways of measuring and monitoring idiosyncrasies on those first calls of like, it's actually a couple of red flags sort of here as an individual.
So a lot of it's really down to, I guess their communication style, their presentation skills, just as much as it is about the business. You're gauging a lot of things at the same time there.
Yeah,
I think it must be quite exhausting to be trying to look out for all of these things at the same time.
But you'll be surprised, because when you notice it, that's all you just focus on, and I think that can be really fatal for some founders. And sometimes they just have a bad day, and it feels bad to sort of say that, right?
Yeah. And well, that's the thing. I mean, do you ever find yourself kind of overthinking it and getting a bit inside your own head on that front, like trying to make excuses for people? And do you know what I mean? It must be quite difficult to go down those rabbit holes sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's tough. But then I think some of the founders who follow up with an email, and as somebody said, look, I've had a really bad day. I have to chat through it again, or like call me up, something like that situation. And similarly, I may have had a bad day, and then I kind of reflect on the situation, and go, actually, I was a bit of a dick. Really sorry. And sometimes I feel really guilty, and so, I'll try and apologize or whatever. But that's from the situation. I think like it tells a lot about a person if you're willing to forgive someone, in my opinion, and how you forgive. So that is something I sort of look for. If you accept zero tolerance in that situation, no one's going to work for you. No one
Yeah.
wants to work for you or deal with you, even if you're a founder. But if you're willing to be, there's a fine line being a pushover, but I think it is important to know that the whole element of forgiveness and like trust, because it goes to that point of like you allow the right environment for people to fail and make mistakes, which people, I would argue, if you've hired the right people, and again, there's a whole question of what the right people are, they'd feel more comfortable about pushing the boundaries a bit more further. They'd be wanting to maybe stay and work for you for longer. I could be completely wrong, but like I do think it goes to heart of kind of what the culture is, and often it's, as you say, startups, you're breaking shit all the bloody time. You just need to make sure you keep them going ahead, and if people are worried about it, then they're not gonna um, argue against you. They're not gonna push each other. They're not gonna feel like it's okay to say things in that situation. And so
You
I
need the
think it's
room to
super
make
important.
mistakes in that environment.
Yeah, and that's, I think, super important pre-seed. And if you don't behave like that, then well, there you go. That's quite indicative. So
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
yeah, I appreciate it's very soft stuff, but you'd be surprised how you can kind of pick that stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, the three hardest words to say in the English language is "I was wrong," and then the second three hardest words to say is "I forgive you." So I mean that, and nothing is truer of leadership, and that so kind of brings me to the last thing I wanted to ask you about before I let you go, which is about leadership. It's crazy to me. It seems really crazy to me that we invest an enormous amount of time, energy, money into businesses across, angel, VC, and all these different stages, really with a lot of emphasis on providing a lot of support when it comes to operations, to go to market, to tech, and so on. But it seems like we provide little to none when it comes to leadership qualities, which, as someone who kind of cut my teeth in leadership in the hospitality industry, having run bars, restaurants, then live music venues and hotels and stuff like that before I sort of shifted my career to a long time ago now into what it is more into sales, and then eventually into executive leadership and so on. Like, I know firsthand that you aren't generally just throwing the keys of a business and told, right, you've got 500 people that you now look after. Like, you're expected to have a certain amount of fundamental leadership skill before you can go ahead and do that. And it's the same is true for most team leaders or management. But for some reason, CEOs, we kind of give them a pass. It's like, here's 2 mil, you're now in charge of people. Do you feel like we should be doing a bit more there? Like, because I'm of the opinion, like, especially VCs, angels, and so on, should we not be providing a bit more resources or mentorship there when it comes just to those fundamental leadership skills? Because even if you come across someone, like you said, that has all the green flags, it's still a skill that needs to be improved over time, because of what the leader they're going to need to be at the beginning is going to be a very different one later on when they're running a scale up, right?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something I spend a lot of time thinking about, like, what is leadership, which I know sounds very philosophical and probably not one for a Friday evening. But anyway, I sort of read this book recently, and I'll get to my point. And a friend recommended it, one of the brothers of Karamazov. This is like a Russian literature book. It's very thick and very heavy. But I kind of read it and I was like, this is really quite deep and intense. I didn't really quite get it until a point which sort of kind of resonated with me about the book is actually, I would argue, a lot about what belief is. And you only know what you really believe by being stress tested of why you shouldn't believe it. And the whole book in itself talks about a person's faith to Christianity, and a lot of bad things happen, and yet he still kind of wants to believe and do good. And I think a lot about leadership, where it sometimes fails, is people don't know what they really want to believe in and what makes them different, and therefore they can't attract the right people who believe that sense of view, and therefore can't work in unison for it. And so what I mean by that is, look, let's talk about right at the start what we talked about of things, move things fast and break things, or kind of what we said, or perfection. They are two very different types of beliefs that an individual may have. None is right or wrong in certain situations. but I don't think people know what they want. And I think people don't really know what their leadership is. And once I think they feel comfortable in what that is, I think then they can therefore build the right culture for it, to therefore create the right leadership about it. And that's where I think people, sometimes struggle with. And it goes back to the point we made right at the start, which is what felt like it's getting this whole circle of like believing in your sort of self and knowing who you are. So people think about a leader and they're like, oh, I need to be like Jeff Bezos. Or, actually, I think it was at Napoleon Hill when he talks about, who would you have dinner with, 8 people, and you be them. And because who you really admire. And I actually don't think it's necessarily about that. And I could be completely wrong with the situation, right? But I think it's super important to find like your voice and what you really believe in. And therefore, that has echoes of what you think you should be as a leader. And where I think leadership skills are super important are, has the person had the time to really think about what they are and how to kind of convey that in terms of actions and behaviors as a leader, as a CEO? Do you want to be more of a coaching one, or do you want to believe, glory at all costs sort of situation? And how do you personify that? I think where it can be really useful for, first-time founders is chatting with them and asking if they need help to have, with a conversation, like actually being a sparring partner. Like, I don't know, maybe they've got a call with the CEO of a company they want to, sell a product to. Okay, well, let's maybe speak and let's have a coaching situation, how you would present yourself and give you feedback on that. But that's probably, say, more communication, one of those situations, and being able to think about it. I think kind of leadership does start from trying to figure out, again, very deep and philosophical, kind of who you are and what your beliefs are at that sort of situation. Therefore, how do you kind of find people who also believe in that same view, and then make sure you all work in the same unison with that situation and move in the same direction. So yeah, I know it's a very deep point to maybe talk about.
No, but that's I absolutely agree with you, and I think it has to be a deep answer to it, because it was to some extent a deep question, and that's why I like doing this show, because that's where we can get to. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I don't think you can't, like, almost to my point about my wife at the dinner table, talking about confidence. It's very difficult to lead if you're not confident in your own ability, if you're steadfast in your own morality, if you understand sort of what your principles are, things like that. So, to your point about, what is your vision, not only of the company, but of yourself, because at the end of the day, a leader is setting an example. And if you're not really sure as to what that example is in the first place, how can you continue to lead? Yeah. I think it's an interesting topic. And like you, it's one I think about a lot, probably far too much, but it's just something that I think that I'm just curious. I feel VC is quite proud of being able to offer a lot of additional support, to founders. And that's one that I feel like is kind of fundamentally missing, especially for that transition from early stage to later stage, which is a huge culture shock for a business, and a huge culture shock for CEOs, especially, and all co-founders really at that stage. And so many don't make it past that stage for that reason. And I just feel like maybe we need to do more to equip them, for that change, in that role and what's expected of them and everything else.
And I think there could be a linguistic point to this of we call someone who is in the business as CEO, and I think actually at the really early stage it's just your founders, you're a founding engineer, you're a founding commercial person, or whatever. And when we start using that doesn't necessarily force them to therefore be leaders, because they may not want to be. I mean, I meet so many great early stage CEOs who just love building shit, and they will be a brilliant person like product manager or senior product manager or chief product officer situation. So let them create the path to kind of come to that and then fill in the sort of gaps there. But you're right. I think leadership is really tough to sort of do. And I think leadership within a startup is probably what shocks people the most. Because I think there's so many people I meet who have like been really senior within FTSE 250, 500 companies. They're trying to be a leader within like a startup. And it's just like, good luck with that, mate. It's not really going to work, is it?
It goes both ways. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so tough to sort of think about. And I often think about kind of like the Mike Tyson quote, like you can kind of prep all you want until you get punched in the face, right? Words to that effect. And I think kind of leadership training is partly like on the job, but I think what founders should have is a safe space to go, fucked up there, and I want to talk to you about it. Let's what should I have done differently, and what should I have time to reflect. And I don't think, from my experience, a lot of founders have that mental headspace to sort of reflect on that situation of going like, actually, if I want to be the leader who I am, this is what I should have done, and this is what I will do forward. Sort of situation. It's kind of like go, 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 go.
Well, I'd say the problem is twofold. It's not only that they do not have the time to even reflect on it, but even if they did have the time, then there's not really anyone they can talk about it with.
Yeah,
because when you are a CEO, you're not going to speak to your VC about it. You don't want to dampen confidence or erode any confidence there. The same with your team. You don't want to spread concern. If it's a concern about the business you have, if you're concerned about something not, a project not going well or whatever. So you're really kind of screwed. And then those in a lot of people's personal lives, either they might be other founders, but again, people talk, so you might not want to do that, or they might not be people that understand the world you're in at all to even have context for what it is you want to talk about. And I think so. It's the cliche that often comes up in every episode, but being a founder is a very lonely space, and being a leader is even lonelier within that space. And it's unfortunate, and I feel like you need to have someone impartial that to some extent understands the space that you're in, that you can just be open and honest with. But it's not easy to find those people, unfortunately.
No, I met this quote literally before this call. I caught with the founder, and like, I've known him for about four years, what he's doing. And he had literally gone through like hell and back, honestly, with what has gone on in his company. And he goes, look, I'm still here. I'm still there. But like, God, was it lonely. And like, I think this is where it can be quite good to get like a chairman in board. I don't want to use the word chairman, but even being part of founder groups, feeling like you're not alone. And I've talked about this on other podcasts about finding your village or finding your tribe. And I think, founders are so worried that they don't want to waste any time, that they don't want to spend investing in that sort of stuff. Like, I've seen founders whose relationships or even marriages fall apart, sadly, because they've been so self-obsessed with the business. They seclude themselves from friends because they haven't invested in that. And they've just been so focused on it. And then in the long run, I think it just doesn't do them any justice when things are really tough, because you kind of need those people to get you through those situations of where it feels like a safe space to do it. And that's part of that sort of founder group and other bits and bobs. But look, I think hopefully founders listen to this. I'd want them to like open up if they're not comfortable, like as much as they maybe not every VC would like this, but like for me as a VC, I'd want you to say, feel vulnerable with it, because we are all vulnerable creatures at the end of the day, right? And you are human just as much as I'm human. And let's talk about it. It's not for me to, assess you on the future round of it. I think it's super important that you are aware of it first of instance, and you are trying to do something better. That is surely only ever a good thing.
Yeah, it demonstrates a strength, not weakness. And I think that's the thing. Yeah. It's being vulnerable for a lot of people, they correlate that with showing weakness, and it's not. I don't think that's actually true at all. I think it's the complete opposite. But that's not to say that you should be vulnerable to everyone, because some people do treat it as weakness. Some people are predators. Definitely. And you have to recognize a predator when they're around. That's unfortunately a reality of the world we live in. But yeah, I mean, look, I'll just quickly share my own personal philosophy on this very quickly before I let you go, which is that, for myself, that there's only one person that I'm ever trying to impress or be better than, and that is myself, to the point where, I always think of it like this, I want to become the man that the 10-year-old version of me would look up to and say, I would like to be him when I'm older. I'm not quite there yet. I think still at this point in time, the 10-year-old version would be like, the hell are you? Get out of my room. But I'm working on it. So, I'll keep you posted on that one. But yeah, listen, man, I should let you go because you've been really generous with your time already. It's Friday. This isn't being released on a Friday, so that might confuse people. But it is Friday when we're recording this, and so I'm sure you've got places you'd rather be than talking with me and hearing me drone on. So all that's left to say is, thank you again. I've really enjoyed talking with you. We're definitely going to have to catch up again soon if you're up for it. And I'll include, obviously, details on you and stuff down below. But is there anywhere else anyone you want to shout out? Anywhere else you want to send people to, etc.?
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to kind of connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't really use Twitter anymore.
You're going to get a flood of pitch decks now.
Yeah. Shout out to probably one of the great mentors I have, like Jeff Cruzy. He's a partner at 7%, like being super instrumental for mine. And sort of Jay Lakhani, who's again another good friend of mine. Both amazing VCs, both sort of who I look up to. So yeah, hopefully there'll be maybe future guests for you, or
absolutely, I'd love to have them on. Yeah, I mean, look, if they're mentor to you, then that's a good enough endorsement for me. So yeah, feel free to get them in touch with me, and that will make a very nice change for VCs getting in touch with me for a change. So there you go. All right, man. Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening and a great weekend, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Please like and subscribe, or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.